When you go through this week's Parsha, Vaykhel Pekudei, the text, the nusach of the Torah, it would seem that the entire process of building the Mishkan was seamless and it was without any glitches and it worked perfectly. And the Torah recounts and tells us how in the first fundraising campaign of Klal Yisrael's history, the Yidden came with so much gold and silver and tcheles and everything that they needed, to the extent that at a certain point they had too much and they had to stop people from donating. It's probably the only time in history that that happened. And the Torah continues and goes through all the kalim and all the details and the specifics of creating the Mishkan and the kalim and the begadim, and it reads very smoothly, and it seems on the surface that there were no glitches and there were no hiccups along the way. However, when we go into the Midrashim, Shemais Rabbah says that there were many hiccups along the way. First of all, there was a group of Yidden who accused Moshe Rabbeinu of unethical behavior with the funds. Moshe Rabbeinu was the chief fundraiser. He was made a big appeal to collect all this massive fortune of precious metals and stones and other materials, and they accused him of skimming off from the top for his own personal use. And Moshe Rabbeinu publicly did an accounting, and he audited himself, and he gave an accounting of every single last thing that was donated. But then, when he came to the silver, the Medrash says that there was some silver he could not remember what he had done with it, until he remembered that he had used some of it for some of the hooks that were outside the Mishkan. Additionally, there were certain kalim that the instructions that Hashem gave Moshe could not comprehend. He could not understand. And Hashem had to show him an image, a diagram, so that he would know and understand how they was to be created. And even then, there was the menorah that Moshe Rabbeinu still could not comprehend how to make it. And Hashem himself had to kind of make the menorah. The Medrash also says that when it came time to erect the Mishkan, the walls of the Mishkan, the crushing, they were so heavy they could not lift it up, and Hashem had to make a nes that Moshe Rabbeinu was infused with an enormous amount of strength to be able to lift it up. And finally, when the Mishkan was built, it actually was completed ahead of time, and it was completed 3 months before the Chanukas HaMishkan. And it sat idle for 3 months until it was used. So we see from the Midrashim that the creation of the Mishkan was not as seamless, without any hiccups, as it may seem when you read this week's Parsha. We see a similar pattern in Tanakh when Shlomo Melech built the first Beis HaMikdash. When you read the Tanakh inside the text, again, it seems like the process went smoothly, and it describes how the Beis HaMikdash, Bais Rishon, was built and established, and in great detail. But the Medrash brings down that there were numerous incidences along the way. The Gemara says that when they were digging to build the first Beis HaMikdash, they hit a well like a spring of water underground, and out gushed water. So much water was gushing out that there was a fear that the entire world is going to drown from this water. In addition, when they came to bring in the Aron into the Kodesh HaKadoshim, the doors of the Kodesh HaKadoshim remained shut and did not want to open. And finally, at the climax of the Chanukas Habayis of the Beis HaMikdash, that morning, the process, the ceremony had to be delayed, because the night before, Shlomo Melech married Bathsheba, and he overslept, and his mother had to come in and wake him up. Yet, when you look in the actual Tanakh, in the Psukim, There's not a mention. It seems like it was smooth. It was only in the Midrashim do we see that. Finally, we see the same pattern in the very beginning by Maaseh Bereshis. When you go through the psukim of Maaseh Bereshis, it seems that when Hashem created the world, it was a seamless, perfect, without any hiccups. However, every single day, something quote-unquote wrong happened. The Medrash Bereshis Rabbah brings down that Hashem wanted to create the world with the midah of emes, but the midah of emes refused and said the world cannot last, cannot be sustained through the midah of emes. So then Hashem wanted to create the world with the midah of din, and Hashem saw that the world cannot be sustained that way. So eventually Hashem created the world with the midah of Rachmanis. And Hashem wanted to create, the Gemara in Chagiga brings down that Hashem wanted to create the world with a special light. That this light was so great and so powerful that you would be able to see from one end of the world to the other end of the world. But then when Hashem saw that there's going to be Rishon, there's going to be the Hamabel and the Haflaga, then Hashem hid this light from the world. That was on the first day. The second day of Bereshis, when Hashem separated the heavenly waters from the earthly waters, the Medrash says that the earthly waters protested. They don't want to be separated from the heavenly waters and be so low and be put on the earthly waters. And in fact, the earthly waters cries till this day for the separation. On the third day, Hashem created the moon and the sun to be exactly equal in power, equal in radiance and in light. And the moon complained, and the moon said, how could it be? You can't have two kings wearing a crown. So Hashem said, okay, I'm going to diminish your light, and the moon was then diminished to reflect the light of the sun. On the fourth day, Hashem told the trees, created the trees, and told that wanted the trees, that the branch of a fruit tree should have the same taste as the fruit. Yet, the tree did not listen, and it wasn't the branches of the tree that retained or that had the taste of the fruit, it was only the actual fruit. On the fifth day, when Hashem created the fish and the birds and the animals, Hashem made each animal had a female and a male so that there could be offspring. But when it came to the Leviathan, Hashem saw that if the male and the female Leviathan are going to have children, the world these are such monstrous, mighty creatures, the world's not going to be able to handle it. So Hashem killed the nekeva and kept it and salted it and keep it until Mashiach comes. And finally, we know, of course, on the last day of, which is the sixth day, when Hashem created Adam and Chava, we know how that day ended. It ended, Hashem said, don't eat from the Eitz Hadas, and of course, they go ahead, they went, and they ate from the Eitz Hadas. Every single day, something went wrong. It was not smooth sailing. Yet, when you go through the psukim in Bereshis, in the first parak of Bereshis, there's not one mention. Not only is there no mention of that, the end of that parsha, the end of that parak, ends off as follows: Vayar lekim es kol asher asa v'hine tayv ma'aid. And it was very good, very good. Not one day went without a glitch. Every single day, there was something that was not planned. There was something that went off script. There was a problem. So the first question is, why, in all of these cases, does the Torah almost like cover it up? Does the Torah ignore the specifics, the details, the challenges, both in Vaykhel and Pekudei, in the building of the Mishkan, in Tanakh, when Shlomo Melech was building the Beis Hamikdash, Harishon, and of course, we just said, by Maaseh Bereshis, and Hashem calls it V'hinei Tov Ma'od. It's very good. It is true that the Torah, of course, does specify and go in detail about Adam and Chava, about the chet of the Eitz Hadas. But that was later, and that was the only thing that the Torah speaks about. The Torah is telling us Two incredibly vital and important life lessons. The Torah is not covering up anything. Torah Shebal Peh, in the Midrashim, in the Gemara, speak about all the quote-unquote glitches, all the challenges, all the things that didn't go perfect. We're not here to ignore the challenges. We weren't here to ignore the problems or the things that didn't go right. But people go through life and they break down. What do you mean they break down? They get stuck. Things happen that they didn't expect. Challenges, problems, doubts. Things happen and we don't know what to do. The Torah says, don't lose sight of the big picture. It is true that when Moshe Rabbeinu and the Yidden were building the Mishkan, things happened that weren't perfect. Moshe Rabbeinu was accused in public, and then for a moment he forgot, and they couldn't lift up the walls, and then it was too early, so it was just sitting there for 3 months, and it is true. But that's not the story. Don't focus, don't get stuck, don't break down by the challenges along the way. Stay big picture and see the whole story. What's the narrative? The narrative, the story that we should walk away with is that Klal Yisrael, who came from Mitzrayim, is now embarking on this was an epic moment in their history, that we human beings are going to create a Mishkan, a small physical domain in which we're going to bring down godliness, we're going to bring down holiness, we're going to bring down the Shekhinah to live with us. Wow, that's the story. There were problems along the way. We're not ignoring it. The Midrash will speak about it. Torah Shebal Peh will speak about it. We have to deal with it. Certainly, we're not ignoring it. We're not in denial. But don't let that become the story. The Yidden now are in Eretz Yisrael, and Shlomo Melech for the first time is building the Beis HaMikdash. Are there going to be problems along the way? The world almost got flooded. Then the Aaron couldn't get into the Kodesh HaKadoshim, and Shlomo HaMelech himself overslept that morning. Did all these things have to be dealt with? Certainly they had to be dealt with. I'm not ignoring the problem. But that's not what we want. The Torah wants you to walk away with. The Torah wants you to walk away with pause and step back and see this historic moment for what it is. Don't break down. Don't get stuck on the challenges and let that divert your attention and let that distract you from the real story, from the real mice of what's happening over here, which is Klal Yisrael building a Beis HaMikdash. Hashem is creating the world, Ma'aseh Bereshis. Not one day went, quote unquote, according to plan. Are we ignoring that? No. The Midrashim speak about it. Torah Shebal Peh speaks about it. But in Torah Shebiksav, when you read the text, Hashem's giving us a tremendous lesson. Through life, you will never have one day that will go how you planned it to go. How many days we wake up in the morning with a plan, a vision, expectation of how today's going to be, and when we go to sleep, fast forward and go to sleep, and we review the day. How much of today was planned and unplanned by me? How much of today was how I intended it to be, anticipated for it to be, or expected it to be? There will be some things that will match up. There will be a lot of things that don't, whether at work, whether at home, whether with the kids, whether emotionally, spiritually. There's so many examples. Says Hashem, but that's not the story. Don't go to sleep with the narrative. Oh, so many problems. Oh, nothing's going my way. Oh, look at this challenge. No. I'm creating a world. I'm doing Brias HaOlam. That's the story. See the whole picture. You have challenges. Certainly we have to deal with it. But don't forget the big picture. You're here in this world. You're doing your best. You're building a family. You're working on your midas. You're working to become more spiritual, to become more of a holy person. You're working on your chesed. You're working on your davening. Did you have challenges? Do you have setbacks? Do you have hiccups? Of course you do. But what's the real story here? That you had hiccups? The real story is that you had a challenge? That's not the story. The story is that you're on this amazing journey and you're evolving and developing and becoming who Hashem meant you to be. I can only do that if I step back and I see the full picture. But it goes one step deeper. Hashem's teaching us a tremendous lesson. There's no chiddush in the fact that not one day went not according to plan by Ma'aseh Bereshis. Why? We don't have to write it in the Torah. You know why? Because what's the big deal? Why are we so surprised? You know why we don't get stuck? Why we don't break down when there's a challenge? It's because how else are we meant to grow? That's what life is about. It's about having hiccups. It's about no day goes according to my plan. So what I need to do is work on myself and work on the solution and work through it. That's how life is meant to be. There's no big chiddush here. There's no surprise of surprise, surprise. I had a setback. Well, that's exactly what life's about. So that's not the story, and don't get so impressed by it. Do we have to deal with it? Certainly we have to deal with it. You know, many people know when it comes time to make a simcha, it's a time of added stress. And there are many people that there's so many details how to pay for the simcha and the catering and the seating and the photography and the gown and the suits and the guest list and the kibudim. There's many, 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 many details. And some people get broken down when details don't go according to plan. No simcha goes perfectly according to plan. Are we people who get stuck and we break down? Or we see the big picture? My child's getting married. I'm making a bar mitzvah for my son. I'm making a bris for my child. Let's stay focused on the big picture. Some things didn't go according to plan. The caterer left out the main course. The invitations had the wrong day. Okay, we'll deal with it. We'll deal with it, but that's not the whole story. We go through work, and there's a lot of stress at work, and frustrations, and issues almost every day. Does that become the whole story? Or the story is, I am doing my best to support my family. I am doing my best to show up every day to the job Hashem gave me, to the role Hashem wants me to play. I'm honest. I'm doing my best. Some days are better, some days are worse. Sure, there are problems. There are some very big problems. We don't ignore it. We deal with it. But the story isn't the challenge. We don't want to break down. We have to look at the whole picture. And people who are Isaac in Tarchit Tzibor, a community gets together to do a tzedakah project to raise money for families in the community, or a community gets together to build a shul, to build a kehillah. And in the process, there are going to be a lot of challenges. When we do things as a klal, as a community, there'll be many opinions. Many people are going to want to do things one way versus another way. Costs go up, things don't go as planned. These things happen all the time. Says the Torah, number 1. Don't get stuck. Don't break down. There are challenges along the way. What's the chiddush? Of course there's going to be challenges along the way. Anticipate them. Expect them. So you'll be ready. But more than that, what's the story here? The story is, so many people here have opinions and we can't get anything done. Is that the story? Or is the story, wow, look at this. The cloud comes together to do an amazing thing. They want to build a shul. They want to build a tzedakah campaign. They want to do chesed. They want to better. That's the story. Along the way there were some hiccups. Don't break down. Don't break down. So when we travel along our journey in life and we start to detect that we're about to break down because we're getting stuck on the details of our challenges and hiccups, let this parsha remind you that number 1, remember this is not the narrative. Look at the big story, the big picture. And number 2, don't be so impressed by a challenge.